Case file, Abraham's tithe. One-time spoils or standing salary rule.
All right, let's open up a new case file. This one's about a foundational story, Abraham's tithe. Now, for a lot of people, this is the #1 reason for a 10% rule. But was it really a blueprint for your paycheck, or was something else going on? That's what we're here to investigate. You've definitely heard this one before, right? It's one of those cornerstone arguments, and honestly, it's often presented as a very simple open and shut case. And there it is. Abraham tithed, so we should too. Seems totally straightforward, doesn't it? A hero of the faith sets a pattern, and we're supposed to follow it. But you know, in any good investigation, you have to look past the headline. And this is where our investigation gets interesting right from the start. See, when we hear tithe, our minds almost always jump to a paycheck, right? Our regular income. But the source material, the actual story of Abraham's tithe, it points to something completely different. War spoils. And that is a huge distinction that changes everything. So with that major clue on the table, let's do it. Let's officially open the case file and examine all the evidence. It's time to peel back the layers and see what the source text actually says. All right, let's dig into the evidence. To really understand what happened, we need to look at what the text actually says, and maybe even more importantly, what it doesn't say. Okay, first question. Did this even happen? And the answer is a simple yes. Genesis chapter 14 is totally clear. Abraham gave a tenth of everything to this mysterious king named Melchizedek. So the event itself, confirmed. But just confirming an event happened is really just step one. To understand what it means, we have to ask the follow-up questions. What was the context? Where did this everything come from? Was Abraham ordered to do this? Was it a regular thing? The answers to these questions are what really matter. Now here's a crucial piece of evidence. It comes from way later, in the book of Hebrews, which clarifies exactly where this stuff came from. It uses the specific word spoils. And as you can see, spoils are not a salary, they aren't business profits, they're plunder, goods seized from an enemy you just defeated in war. And if we go back to Genesis 14, it gives us the actual inventory. After Abraham rescues his nephew Lot, he comes back with all the goods, possessions, people, and livestock that the enemy army had captured. This is the everything he gave a tenth from. So let's be absolutely crystal clear on this key observation, because it's a huge deal. Abraham's tithe was from military plunder. It was not a percentage of a salary or business income or crops from a farm. When we're looking for a pattern for our own lives, the category this came from matters immensely. Okay, so on to the next critical question in our investigation. Was he told to do this? Did God command it? Was there some kind of law that required this? And when you look at the text, the evidence is pretty clear. The answer is no. Genesis 14 has no command from God, no pre-existing law, nothing that made this a requirement. It just happens. It looks like a completely voluntary, spontaneous act. The text records it, but it doesn't establish a policy. And how many times did it happen? In his entire, long, very well-documented life, we have a record of this happening exactly one time. That's it. Just once. Okay, let's zoom out for a second. To understand any event, you have to know when it happened. And let me tell you, the historical context here is a total game changer. Just look at this timeline. Abraham's act happens way over here, literally hundreds of years before the law of Moses was even given. The whole system of tithing for Israel, which by the way was almost entirely agricultural based on things like grain and livestock, not money, that system didn't even exist yet. He was operating in a completely different world. So this wasn't part of some ongoing religious system. It was a unique, one-time encounter between two legendary historical figures. You had Abraham, the father of a nation, and Melchizedek, this mysterious priest king. There was no temple, no organized priesthood, no national law. It was a singular moment in history, totally on its own. So you might be thinking, okay, if it was just a unique, one-off event, why is it even mentioned again in the Bible? And that is a fantastic question. To answer it, we have to jump forward centuries to the New Testament book of Hebrews and see how the author there uses this story. This is a key piece of interpretive evidence. See, the author of Hebrews brings the story up for a very specific theological reason. On the left here, you can see he's using it to argue that Melchizedek's priesthood was greater than the later one, and that he's a type or a foreshadowing of Christ. But now look at what it doesn't do. It never once uses the story to command Christians to tithe. It doesn't establish a salary percentage. It doesn't create a law for church giving. The point is theological, not legislative.
Now, I can hear some of you thinking, but wait a minute. Abraham is our model of faith, right? The father of faith. And that's a totally fair question. If he's our example, shouldn't we just do what he did?
But this is where we have to reframe the question just a little. The real test for a church practice isn't just, did a hero of the faith do this one time? The real question is, did the apostles, the ones who actually established the church, did they teach all believers that this specific act was a required pattern to follow? That's the missing link you have to find. Okay, we've looked at the original text, we've examined the historical context, and we've analyzed how the New Testament uses the story. It's time to pull all the evidence together for our final analysis. And this table really just lays it all out. On one side, here's what the text clearly shows: a one-time voluntary gift from war spoils that was later used as a theological picture. But then look at the other side. Here's what the text doesn't show: a standing income tithe, a recurring rule, a universal command, or legislative rule for the church. The gap between what the text says and the rule that's often built on it, well, it's pretty big. So what's the final verdict in this case file? The event? It's confirmed. It definitely happened. The pattern for all believers to follow? That's an assumption. And the mandate, the command? Based on this evidence, it's unproven. Case closed. And really, that's the bottom line. Taking a one-time voluntary gift that came from the spoils of a battle and turning that into a mandatory lifetime rule for your salary, well, that requires making a pretty big interpretive leap. And it's a leap the text itself never actually asks us to make.
If the cross put it to death, we tag it, tow it, and refuse to resurrect it. Share it if it helped you. Subscribe if someone else needs it. We sow truth the way Jesus taught, not the way man demands.